Alexandra Pope, Canadian Geographic Magazine. A bit of a double-barreled question for both of you. James, do you have a next frontier in mind that you'd like to explore? And for both of you to answer, in a burgeoning era of deep sea and space exploration, how do you explore responsibly? And what role do relationships play in successful exploration?
Well, that's like 3
I got one shot.
Right. Well, we only scratched, well, can't even say scratched the surface. I say that our explorations in the Hadal Deeps were the equivalent of kind of airdropping into the middle of Africa at night with a flashlight, right? And saying that you've explored that continent. So there's an area down there, if you aggregate all of the 12 or so deep Hadal trenches, you know, below 6,000 meters down to almost 11,000 meters. It's an area, you know, let's say the size of the United States that we literally haven't looked at. There's a lot of interesting things to explore down there. There's a particular site that I wanted to go see. We wound up dropping a robotic lander at that site, but I really need to go back and look around there more and take some samples. And these are in these deep subduction zones. But there's this hypothesis when the two plates grind one over the other, it squeezes water up through the rock, which picks up a lot of minerals, and you have bacterial activity down there. And we literally dropped our lander right on the deepest bacterial map that's ever been discovered. And so we actually proved the hypothesis that that process is working. Now, that could be a model for how life originated on the planet. We don't have enough data yet. It's that lack of data that drives me. It's the blackness that's out in front of the headlights that you didn't see, you know, that makes me want to go back. And I have very, very specific science targets in mind. Your second question was for both of us about responsible exploration, I think?
Yeah, you know, we've got more and more people wanting to explore the deep sea, wanting to go to space as visitors. So how do you do that responsibly? How do you balance conservation, research, with, you know, personal bucket list items?
Yeah. Well, they're not bucket. I mean, I think everything in life's a bucket list, right? I mean, you know, everything you do, playing with your kids, should be on your bucket list, right? So I don't think of it that way. I think of it as an endless series of possibilities of finding out more and more about how the natural world works. So it's curiosity. So curiosity is not a bucket list. You're born with it. I had it as a little kid. That's how I met Joe. I wanted to find out things, you know, when I was a teenager. So how you explore, I think you're probably in between the lines of your question is how do you not implode, right? You know, well, first of all, the way we've already done, I mean, you can speak to safety as well as anybody can in your early pioneering days.
Well, first of all,
Can we get you closer to the mic?
Can you come closer to the mic, please? Thanks.
yeah, first of all, Jim mentioned curiosity, and it has to be science-based and solution-seeking curiosity. It has to be directed, and there is this challenge of doing it responsibly, and so you've got to do your due diligence about the safety issues and about the impact that you have when you do these kinds of things. But it's essential for us, all of us, and that's why we're here today, because of exploration and discovery, and that's seeking those new horizons.
I think, you know, to answer your
This
question.
gentleman with the check shirt had a question.
Yeah, but I just want to talk about this idea of responsibility. It's the responsibility of anybody that's designing a machine, especially one that a human being is going to get into, but even one that we're not, where we're pouring millions of dollars of effort and energy and maybe taking up scientific grant money and so on that deprives somebody else of access. It's our responsibility as engineers to test. Don't just guess that it's going to work. The ocean is a very, very unforgiving environment. So it took us 7 years to build this. And by year 2, or by year 3, we had the sphere. Not that one right there, the one that's still inside. We had the sphere, and we had tested it. And then we built the rest of the sub around that. But I call it healthy paranoia. What can go wrong? And, you know, I'm a screenwriter. I could create lots of nasty scenarios in my mind, and then we engineer against those. It's not just the strength of the vehicle's hull, it's everything that can possibly go wrong on the vehicle. It could be a fire, could be contaminating your atmosphere on the inside, could be a power failure, could be a loss of comms, loss of tracking, all of those things. And you write them into a set of procedures and safety contingencies, and then you train. I mean, I always used as my model NASA. You know, NASA knows how to manage risk, and they also know that there will be failures. The thing about exploration is you've got to know going in that there's always that X factor that you can't control. So you manage every risk you can possibly conceive of through assiduous engineering, and then when that X factor comes up, you're not worrying about all those other things. Now you've solved that problem, because we didn't know that problem before.
You have only been at a small, very tiny point of the seabed. We have now the discussion in the international seabed authorities about deep sea mining.
Yes.
Do you have a position on this? Should we wait till we really know more about the deep sea before we start exploiting the seabed?
Well, the ocean, to me it has to do with the relativity of wrong. It's wrong to be strip mining habitat that contains 20,000 species, like mature rainforest, destroying it as we are in the collective we in the Congo and places like that, Indonesia, to extract the minerals that we need to feed our voracious technical society. And we can give ourselves, you know, the kind of assuage our conscience a bit by saying, well, we need that lithium and that molybdenum and that cobalt and everything so that we can transition to renewable energy. But I think that it does far less harm in the deep ocean. You said I've only explored a pinpoint. I think that's true in the larger sense with this vehicle going into the Hadal depths. But what you're talking about now is seabed mining, such as picking up polymetallic nodules and so on in the Clarion-Clipperton zone. I've spent a lot of time driving over a lot of barren abyssal seabed, so I don't get as exercised about that as some other conservationists. I believe very, very strongly in ocean conservation up in the twilight zone and the photic zone where the vast biomass of life is, where we're voraciously stripping out all of the apex predators. We've taken out about 90% of the apex fish in the oceans. We're now moving down into the twilight zone and harvesting that vast biomass that moves up and down diurnally, you know, during the day, this big vertical migration that takes place. I think that the damage being done that's already accepted is vastly greater by several orders of magnitude than the damage to ecosystems that could be done in the abyssal floor. And frankly, I'm not opposed to it. Now, if something comes up that I don't know about, that I don't think we should study the problem forever. We're going to die as a species if we keep studying the problem forever. We have to act decisively on the things that we know are going to work.
What lessons are in your mind from
Ian, go ahead. Yeah.
Ian Bailey Globe and
But didn't think I was going to say that, did you?
Whoa, good for you.
Ian Bailey Globe and Mail, the Titan tragedy now. What lessons, in your view, are there from the Titan tragedy for the tourists, but also for government? The Canadian government, like other governments, has used a lot of resources into the rescue attempt we talked about.
I think it's a fair question. I'm standing in front of a sub that I designed myself. And we, look, when we dove this thing, I dove it the deepest, but my fellow designer, Ron Allam in Australia, also dove it. We dove it anything from 2 to 3 times the depth of Titanic, safely, multiple times, right? So, once again, I go back to that issue of engineering. I think it's really important for people to remember that we have over a half-century of a perfect safety record as the deep submergence community, the research community, right? Actual exploration, actual research. And even the tourist dives that were done to Titanic by Mike McDowell, whom you know very well, using the Mirror submersibles, were done safely for 15 years. So even tourist diving, we have literally millions of human hours inside subs, in tourist subs, all over the world right now. No fatalities, no incidents, no deaths, no implosions, until today. This is an extreme outlier of a data point that in a sense proves the rule. And the rule is we've been safe for half a century. If you think about half a century is the length of time, a little bit more, between the Wright brothers and the first 747. Okay, half a century is a long time to not have killed anybody. I think we know what we're doing. I think that I can imagine some new regulatory effort coming out of this. If you think about when the Titanic disaster itself took place, that set in motion all of the SOLAS rules that are in place now, the International Ice Patrol, mapping where the icebergs are, all of those things, lifeboat rules, all of the passenger rules that are international rules of the sea now under the SOLAS regulations, right? Those all came out of the Titanic disaster. So we have to be reminded of the possibility of human failure.
Regulation by
Okay,
one
hang on,
government
I'd
or
like
multiple
to
governments?
just.
Well, this is where it falls apart. There's no real international authority governing deep submergence work. First of all, people could easily go out and spend more sitting around talking about a bunch of rules that we don't need, spend more money doing that than we actually have as funding to explore the deep ocean. So let's just put things in perspective. This is not the most dangerous thing for the human race to be worried about right now.
Okay, last two questions. I'd like to go to this gentleman with the curly hair and then the lady right beside.
He's got curly hair, but we don't know he's a gentleman.
Sure enough. Hi, James. Liam Fox, the Canadian Press. I just wanted to ask, what are your views on the Hollywood writers and actors strike, and how could you see them impacting your future film plans?
I'm going to skip that one because that's not why we're standing here. Let's talk about either Dr. Joe's work or Sal's.
A question here on storytelling, if I could.
Yeah.
I just wonder, you're a storyteller and an explorer. I'll let you answer in which order they go. What do you see as the relationship between the two?
I think it's absolutely critical for explorers to be the sort of the tip of the spear for all of humanity, and to bring that singular experience back and share it the best way they know how. Because I think explorers must be storytellers. Otherwise, send a robot.
Should we be sending storytellers, journalists to the moon? I mean, to what degree do you take that?
I think Kurt Vonnegut proposed that we send poets to Mars. It's not a bad idea, actually, but NASA will never do it.
Between the two of you, you've been to the Titanic wreck 50 times?
How many times did you dive?
2 dives.
He did 2 dives.
33.
I did 33 dives.
Why go back so many times? What do you learn?
It was on 3 different expeditions. The first one was for the movie, so it was just imaging the exterior in a way that sort of fit the story, and we did some science and some exploration at the time. We went back in a very targeted way to explore the interior of the wreck in 2001 and 2005. So, and that could be ongoing. We were able to explore to archaeologically survey with video cameras and small robotic vehicles about 60% of the interior of the wreck. So there's still actually theoretically more work to do. I think imaging the exterior, imaging the debris field, I think we know what we need to know at this point.
After all that,
Question, please.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead.
I certainly take your point that the deep sea exploration industry has had a long safety record. But I wonder about the impact to you personally of the Titan tragedy. I mean, would it at all give you pause about going out in an experimental, uncertified submersible like this one again? And would something different be going through your mind as you descended into the water?
No, I was pretty concerned about implosion risk and the other hazards I mentioned over a 7-year period. And we did test after test after test, and scenario after scenario, and a lot of pilot training and so on. So that little thing right over there went in a freezer, and I would go in and do simulated dives, just like NASA would close the astronauts into a space shuttle simulator or whatever. Did 10 and 12 hour simulated dives in that thing, and they would throw failures at me, including simulated fire and other failures, battery failures. They'd just run through the computer. So we did it like NASA. So I entered this vehicle with great confidence in the vehicle. Now, if I got trapped by a fishing net, that had broken loose from some purse seiner, and drifted, and it was a ghost net sitting on the bottom, I would be worried about that. But I wasn't worried about the engineering. I certainly wasn't worried about imploding, because we had tested everything. That's how it should be. right? Now, you know, so you asked me what the effect on me of this accident was. Well, a good friend of mine was in the sub, P.H. Nargeolet. He's a legendary submersible pilot, fellow Titanic explorer. We had a kind of friendly competition to see who had dived the most. And I think it's unresolved at this point. I don't know how many he just did, you know, over the last few weeks. But, I mean, before the accident, obviously. But, you know, so it's an emotional shock. It's like a gut punch. You don't expect it because you don't expect an implosion to happen because that's what you spend all your time and all your finite element analysis and your computer simulations and everything else to prevent. But they obviously didn't do that. They didn't approach it with that same rigor and discipline, unfortunately.
In all
It
your
is quickly,
guides,
yes or
you
no,
have
should
had
there be
a
more
close call. Has
regulation?
your perception or
You
assessment
know
of
what,
risk
we started
changed over
making time
time?
for your photography, so thank you very, very much.
Quickly, yes or no, should there be more regulation?
I think very specific regulation around treating any kind of passenger vehicle, which it was, under the same way that you treat a ship that takes passengers, or a fishing boat. You take passengers out on a paid fishing, you know, cruise, should be treated the same way, and there are regulations in place for that. So yes, there should be some.
Perfect.
Thank you
sir.
so much. Okay, we're going to take these three over to the capsule for a short, just a short photo op.
Yes, sir.
That was good. James, right here. Yeah, just right here.
All right.
Just bring it.
It's called Take Two.
When kids come here and see this exhibit, what's your hope?
I want them to be inspired. I want them to be inspired. I want them to build a sub themselves and get in it. You know, people ask me, especially after the recent accident, why would you build a sub and go to the bottom of the ocean? The kid never asked that question. You know, yeah, of course. Why wouldn't you? And I just want to stay that kid. All right, so if we want to do this scientifically, it's like this. Look over here.